So once you've learned how to actually draw settings and characters, it can be very difficult to mesh them together so that they look like they belong in the same world. Honestly, I think you can set yourself up for a lot of success by placing things, whether that's your character or furniture or important stuff, into your settings when you're first designing everything, the better. The sooner you do that, the better. So early on, during your design phase, draw your character standing in the setting, even if it's just a doodle, gesture in where you think the shadows and stuff are for the lighting, put in your colors, like a little thumbnail version of your colors, just to make sure that everything matches up. It can really help you explore how to fit your character in properly, like to make sure that they're the right size compared to the rest of the space, or to make sure that they look like they fit in with the setting. If you do it early on when you're designing and you haven't put too many calories into this one thing, the better, so that you're not figuring this stuff out when you are actually drawing your pages and you have to get a page out tomorrow and oh my god, you're stressing out and nothing looks right. Doing this stuff early on also really helps kind of get you used to integrating things into your setting, and that's a good thing to do early on, is to get used to that, because that's your whole comic right there. It's very weird recording this because Bones has pulled out like a bench or something in front of our recording space, so I have to perch on top of this bench and try and get close to the microphone, so bear with me, guys. Anyways, here are some things to help, whether you are right now you're designing your setting, trying to figure out how to put characters into it, or if you're currently drawing your comic and you're staring at the page and you need to start integrating your characters into the setting right now so that your comic page looks nice. Hopefully wherever you are, this will help. So first off, it really helps me when I place the feet of my character onto the floor. It sets me off to a good start so that my character isn't in the wrong perspective, which can be very jarring and take me out of what I'm looking at if the character is in one perspective and the setting is in another perspective, unless of course that's your intention. So by starting by placing their feet onto the floor, making sure that it lines up correctly, that's a good foundation to build up to the correct perspective and make sure they look like they're actually standing in this setting or area or background. It can stop them from looking like they're floating. It can stop sometimes you put a character on a floor and it looks like their feet are broken because you just don't know how to place their feet. So starting with this can really help fix all that. So what I usually do is I start by drawing a grid on the floor. So I definitely do this for when I have to physically show the whole character and show them actually standing on the floor within the panel. I definitely start out by doing this, but I also will do this if I'm struggling a lot with a panel where my character isn't touching the floor, and I'll just draw beyond the panel border and just figure out the perspective and make sure that they're placed correctly if I really need to, if things are looking weird, and then obviously erase all that later, and then all you see is a nice little top half of the character that looks right now. But I'll start by drawing a grid on the floor to understand the surface, and sometimes I'll even draw an X on the floor right below the character's feet. It just kind of helps figure out where to place the feet in compared to the hips, and make sure that the bottoms of the feet, which I kind of draw out into rectangles, look like they're sitting properly on the surface of the floor. Another trick I'll do if I'm really struggling with making my character look integrated into the scene, especially if I'm working on a perspective that's kind of extreme, like say a worm's eye view or a bird's eye view or something like that, it really helps to sit down and make sure that the perspective on your character is exactly the same as what's applied to your background. So if you're not sure how to do this, I usually guesstimate it at first and then kind of figure it out with rulers afterward, which that process has definitely helped me get better at eyeballing it now, but I definitely had to start out by doing more measuring. So if you're starting out with figuring out how to do this, break your character down into boxes. So for example, their head can be a box, and their torso and their limbs can all be rectangles. And start out by drawing that to make sure all those rectangles are in perspective, and then draw the details of the characters within it. And make sure you use lots of guiding lines and not guiding lines, what are those called? You know, the reference lines to figure out like where your character's eyes and the middle of their faces and stuff. Make sure you're using lots of those just to ensure that everything is placed correctly in perspective. And if your character's perspective matches up with the background perspective, you're good. You're gold. You got this. They're gonna look like they belong there. You got this. Okay. So once you've done those things and you've got your nice, lovely sketch down that's all in perspective and your character's standing on the floor and it looks really great, it's really important that when you are, say, inking your page or coloring it, that your characters and your settings have, say, like a consistent line weight. For example, you want to make sure everything is stylized the same so that your character isn't in one style and your background is in a whole other style. So for example, with line weight, so how thick or thin a line is. So if your background has like a crazy thick line and your character has a crazy thin line, it's going to look really jarring. It's going to look like they belong in two different dimensions of space and time. So in this case, I'd recommend using the same line weight width for everything. Or if you want to get more complicated, if you have things that are closer to, say, the camera, make the lines thicker, whereas things in the background get thinner. But any stylistic choice that you apply to the background, make sure you're applying it to your characters. So for example, if your background has like, you know, if you're using like textured lines, use textured lines on both the characters and the background. This seems like, so like an example that I find really jarring, some people like it and it's totally cool if like, this is what you like and this is what you want to do with your comic or whatever, but I find some people will take a photograph of a background and they'll basically put it through a bunch of Photoshop filters so that it kind of looks like it's been sketched in or drawn in, but usually it is a very, very different style considering it's like a photograph than to the illustrated characters. So I find this very jarring. So whatever filters you're applying to the background photo, apply that stuff to your characters, I guess, and just get them to try and match as much as possible, because I find it really jarring and weird when it's super hyper-realistic in the background and super cartoony in the foreground, unless someone has done something very masterful to, like, mesh them. But yeah, whatever stylistic choices you do to your setting and your background, make sure you do it to the illustrated objects and characters within this setting. And along those same lines, it is really important to color and light your background and characters in the same way. Make sure that your color palettes match up for both. Say if your character, you picked out a palette that's like very warm pinks, and that's like their major color throughout their whole design. The way I usually color my character designs is like, I kind of imagine if they're in like pure daylight, what their colors would look like, and then I apply kind of like atmosphere and mood to it when I put them in the actual scene. But that's what you gotta do. If you have this character who's made of like warm pinks and you're putting them into this background or this setting that is like very cool, say it's maybe a nighttime scene, everything's like cool colors and it's a little bit darker, you'll want to adjust the colors on your character so that they're not necessarily these bright warm pinks. You probably want to dull them down, you probably want to make them cooler, so maybe they're closer to purple or blue, and make sure that they mesh well with the setting. And the same thing goes for lighting, you know, whatever direction the light and shadow is casting on your background, you want to make sure that it applies to your character in the same way. So it doesn't look like, you know, they're popping out of the background with bright colors, or the light isn't hitting them correctly, or their shadow is casting weird, and it just doesn't look like they're there in the scene. It looks like they've been like pasted on top. You want to avoid that. So if you're struggling with integrating your characters and your settings, you might need to adjust the style, you might need to check the lighting or the perspective or the color palette, and it definitely will take practice and troubleshooting to kind of notice problems and fix them, like anything in art and creating stuff, but you'll get there. Trust me, I struggled with it a lot when I first started. Things that have really helped me was, you know, studying from life, grabbing photos of people and drawing them within the settings and kind of understanding how they interacted with the different planes and figuring out how the colors work together. That can always really help with figuring out the perspective and how to make characters look like they're integrated with the setting. Is just studying from what it really looks like in real life. And like I said, if you're struggling now, the more you practice, the better you'll get at it. And just keep an eye out for little ways to make it look more real and more integrated. You can do it. I believe in you. And make sure that you're not avoiding drawing backgrounds and practicing this stuff. You're not going to get better at drawing backgrounds and integrating characters with your settings if you don't draw the darn things. So go make sure you draw them, you silly beans, okay? Make me proud, please. Okay, anyways, that is all I have for today. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. And yeah, I'm tired. Ooh, I'm always tired. Why do we even talk about being tired? Because I'm always tired. So right now, I'm really focused on just getting 9 Point done and making sure that I get it done for the end of August. I don't know if I'm going to hit that deadline, but I'm trying my darndest. And color comics are a lot of work. But it's going to be worth it because we're going to get it printed with the Kickstarter that's going on right now. Link in the description down below and all that stuff. But I'm gonna hit my deadline. We're gonna get it printed. It's gonna be good. And once I'm done, I'll be less tired. So there we go. Okay, thanks again for watching. Make sure to subscribe and comment and all that good YouTube stuff. And I'll see you guys in a couple days. Goodbye. Ooh woo.